Good morning, everyone. I'm Daniela Lemos, and on behalf of Fundecitrus, I welcome all of you who are joining us today for the 11th edition of the Fundecitrus Crop Forecast Survey, the PES. I'd like to thank you, everyone, for being here, and I'd like to remind you that our commitment is to deliver year after year the best and most accurate orange and crop forecast for Brazil and also the whole world. I would like to remind you all that we have live on our YouTube channel with the simultaneous translation into English to several countries. Those of you that are joining us online, here in person at Fundecitrus today, we have around 200 people. We are all expecting us to announce the crop forecast for 2025-2026. This year, we have adopted a more compact format for our crop forecast announcement. We will have the forecast and its main aspects first, and the second part will go deeper into the discussion with more detailed technical information. We remind you that the annual announcement of the crop forecast surveys follow a strict confidentiality protocol designed to ensure fair competition. This prevents the sharing or disclosure of individual data among orange juice companies collaborating in the survey and among citrus growers themselves. The PES has been conducted by Fundecitrus since 2015 in cooperation with Unesp Jabuticabal and a technical committee. At the end of this broadcast, the reports from this crop forecast survey will be available on the Fundecitrus website. At this time, would like to announce our crop for 2025-2026. I would like to invite to join me on stage Juliano Alves. It's the fourth time I've been here with you all, and I'm very curious about this announcement. Good morning, everyone. Would like to thank you all for coming, and we have good news. We are going to have a good crop. This year we have the tree inventory that we have just finished that provides more robustness to data. We are very sure of the figure we are going to present. We are going to have this year 314.676 million boxes. That is 306 to 322 million boxes variation. So this crop has grown as compared to historical average of around 5%, 4.8. That's the historical average for the last 10 years. And if we compare with the previous crop, this has been, that was one of the lowest ever. We have growth of 36%. That is, we are going back to the levels of an average crop. It's not a bumper crop, but it's a good crop. And that brings relief to the sector because the previous crop was dramatic, especially due to an atypical climate that was hotter and drier. What about the future? The future, well, we have to analyze that for us to have an assertive and a straightforward forecast that is clear, we have to have the number of bearing trees in a correct way. That's why every 3 years we have this tree inventory carried out, and we have just finished it. You're going to have more detailed information later on. So we have more mature fruit. So this is assertive figure, and also we have to estimate fruit drop, and we have studies to be the basis for that. And also we have to focus on the perspective of the fruit weight at harvest. Those four factors bring us to an equation that provides us with a lot of safety in terms of the final crop figure. And the next update is going to be in September. Why is this crop increasing? The main factor, besides cultural practices carried out by farmers, fertilization, irrigation, control of pests and disease, we have the climate. That is the prevailing factor, not only for orange, but for all crops. If you have a very dry and hot year, that will compromise the crop, especially at post-bloom. So what do we have, in fact, that brings the crop upwards this year? Well, we finished the inventory as compared to the previous one, and we have seen growth of 7.5% of mature trees. Why is that so? Due to two factors. First, we have decreased eradication to almost zero with the new prices practiced in 2023 and 4. Citrus growers kept the same area. And the second factor is that younger groves are now more bearing. Groves that were planted, 2 or 3 years ago, they're now bearing fruit. So what about the other factor that will explain 93 boxes more as compared to the previous one? 21 million is related to the tree inventory. If I didn't have the tree inventory growth, then we would have 290 million. But now we have 70 more million boxes due to this higher production in terms of fruit. So this growth of number of adult trees, mature trees, plus the fruit per tree increase provided us with this higher crop. Also, we have the fruit drop and the fruit size that will tend to reduce the crop because the fruit weight is going to be a little lower, and we have a higher fruit drop rate as well. So here we compare 199 million trees in total in the citrus belt. We now go up to 209. Out of the total of 169 million trees that we used to have, 170 almost in 2022, this number is now 182. We eradicated less, younger growths now became bearing, and with that, we came up with this growth of 12.5 of mature trees. Also, bearing trees, young areas in the citrus belt decreased in 3 million trees. Citrus growers failed to plant as they used to before in the citrus belt and migrated to areas that were more distant to escape the original areas because of the greening. Here, we have very good news, but it has to be seen carefully. How much did we have in irrigated area 30 years ago? 3%. How much did we have 10 years ago? 25% of the citrus area. And now almost half of our citrus area is irrigated, 45%. But irrigation is a tool that is really interesting to increase fruit size, fruit weight. However, if you don't use it properly and in a situation of a favorable climate, it may be side effects that is reverse. Where do we irrigate? Triangular Mineiro, probably everything, because that's the drier region with the lower relative humidity, so we do need irrigation there. The central and northern region, we have 60-80% of irrigated area. So you can see that where climate is more is moderate, so we can do without irrigation, like Itapetininga. Avaré Here also 13%. So we have to use irrigation in a smart way. And we have to keep in mind that climate has changed, temperature has increased, rainfall is more scarce, and irrigation is becoming an almost essential measure in many citrus producing areas in Sao Paulo and in Brazil. What else do we have to keep in mind? What are the factors that are affecting specifically this current crop? Number one, keep in mind that orange trees have 3 times where fruit will drop. Physiological drop right after flowering, where the orange tree will produce 100,000 flowers, of which 5,000 will remain, to them produce 500 to 1,500 fruitlets. What happens is that the critical moment is the post-flowering one. If we have temperatures of 38, 40 degrees or higher, then the plant will have a hormonal imbalance producing ethylene, and that will affect the root system, and they will provide a message to the orange tree to drop fruitless. And this year, we have had in mid-August until late September, early October, temperatures of 3.2 degrees above historical average. With that, the first bloom that was encouraged by irrigation or the first rainfall was affected. The colder regions were less affected. We have 2 or 3 degrees variation. But the center region, south region, north region, and triangular region that coincide with that time, then this first flowering was partially affected. So this was a critical time, lower rainfall, higher temperature. Then what happened? The profile of our bloom changed. We have more fruit, but it's concentrated in the second bloom. Why is that so? The second bloom took place when we picked up intense rainfall in the last September, October, November, above average. We had overcast weather, lower temperature, and fruit setting was amazing. It was optimal conditions. Bloom that was happened in October onwards in all the region of Sao Paulo and the Triangular Mineiro, that is west and southwest Minas Gerais, was memorable. With that, the second bloom now represents almost 70%, and the first one 20%, and we almost didn't have third and fourth bloom. So this year is going to be a year of a crop that is a little bit later because of being more concentrated in the second bloom. Processing will delay 45 days approximately, with the 2 blooms more uniform, with a few fruit from third and fourth blooms. What does it mean? Well, it's a lower bloom, lower harvest. Later bloom, later harvest, so we have a good quality if we harvest at the right time, and the harvest is going to be more concentrated. Just to illustrate that, this is a grove of pera orange. You see the amount of fruit in the second bloom in Pirassununga region. A lot of fruit in non-irrigated area. Here's the chess game. Why is it hard for us to get to the bullseye in the crop? If I tell farmers in Votuporanga about the crop, he's going to say, well, this is my crop. If I talk to Altinópolis, Votuporanga, they're going to all talk about their different crops. That's why we have to have 255 samples that are stratified, balanced in different stratum, in irrigated and non-irrigated area. That's why we are totally sure of having a number that is very close to reality. And here we have Professor Barbosa, that has worked in research for more than 30 years and is the most important person in statistics in Unesp Jabuticabal with his whole experience. So here we show that the region that is northwestern, Rio Preto, Votuporanga, that is the hotter region with lower rainfall, they have the lower number of fruit, around 400, whereas Altinópolis has a higher altitude, 890-meter high, moderate climate. They have more than 800 fruit per hectare. And the other regions here in the southeastern sector, Avaré, Itapetininga, when we had more well-distributed rainfall, more moderate temperature, here more than 50 fruit. So there is a direct correlation between climate, rainfall, and temperature, and the number of fruit. And the average weight fruit is 617. That's why some people say different figures, but in fact we have here this figure as being the average. But to our surprise, irrigation this year had a side effect that was not expected. The non-irrigated area, the rain-fed, here 669 fruit, irrigated 554, and average 617. Why is that so? Because groves that have been irrigated, the floral induction took place in June and coincided with the fruitlet at a time of fruit drop, physiological fruit drop, late September, early September. So there was the heat waves of 3.2 degrees above several days a week. And that caused the unbalance in the hormones on the plant and caused the fruit drop. And that resulted in the fruitlets being dropped. Not a lot of part remained. So those that irrigated later on, well, then the plant didn't have the means of having the necessary stress, so it had a lower production. Where plant had a lot of stress and lost almost everything, then they went to a second bloom that offset that. That's why we have all this complexity this year. But we have to say that irrigation has two benefits. First is in the fruit setting. And the second one that is important, it is the increased fruit weight. So when we say that we're going to have less rainfall, for instance, let's say we have this as a forecast, we have to keep in mind that 45% of grows, they have insurance in terms of irrigation that will make fruit grow further with an offset effect as a result. Now, worldwide, we have to always be in the top of the pyramid. How is the distribution of yield in the state of São Paulo? We really, had a puzzle to come up with these results. 1/3 of the groves in the state of São Paulo this year are producing 1 box, 20 hectares per hectare, 1/3. The other 1/3, 34%, is producing between 1 to 2 boxes, 500 boxes per hectare to 1,100. And the other 1/3 is in the range of 1,100 boxes. So who is the citrus grower that will have a profitability? Those that have yield and quality, because we also need quality. We have to have a growed producing fruit with quality. So we have yield and quality. So Ruby, a variety that is excellent quality, producing 1,100 boxes, regardless of the price, it's going to be profitable. And the Grove, that is in the north and northwest West, like Hamelin, there's one. It's one of the most productive variety, and now is producing 1 box per tree, 500 boxes. Only if we have a super priced for that to be, you know, to pay off. The math won't, work here. So today, 1/3 of the groves are below 500. The other 1/3 is from 500 to 1100, and the other one is above 1100. Second factor: 51% of mature trees today, according to our survey, adult ones, right, have greening. So 50% have greening, 50% do not have greening. So we have to keep our groves healthy with yield and quality for us to keep competitive. Is that easy? No, not at all. Something else. Besides the region, besides the age, cultural practices, varieties have a very important impact. What are the most productive varieties? The early ones, Hamelin and Americana. This year, there was a biannuality effect, and the late oranges, Valencia and Natal, also are in the top yield, and Pera with the lower yield, which was expected. Here in Natal, in the region of Brotas that we visited, I went all over Sao Paulo state. I saw with my own eyes every region, and with all the team, we have more than 50 agronomists involved in this work. And here we could see a very high yield in the rain-fed area, like in Natal in April. What about size? We have 2 points here that we may make a mistake about. Number of trees, we're safe about it. Number of fruit as well. What about size, fruit size? Well, fruit size, we have to base that on size. I cannot tell you my opinion. We have to have data that is consistent. Why are we expecting 158 grams per fruit? This year was 159. Last year, 150 or 60. Why is that so? Because we have this following situation. This is historical figures. You can see that the weight usually has fluctuated from 159 to 159 and 8, with exception of this year, 2022, that was too dry. But it couldn't it be 160? Why is it 158? There, we have to have a reason for that. So we really, worked hard to come up with this number. And variables are, number one, there was a reverse reaction in the plant. That is, the more fruit we have, the lower the size. Why is that so? What feeds the fruit? The old leaves. Where does the reserve come from? The root and the old leaves. The more fruit I have close to the old leaves, the lower fruit will be. If you want to have a larger fruit, you thin the tree, get rid of the leaves, so the fruit will grow more. Okay, more fruit. That tends to decrease weight? Yes. Second, there is a correlation proven by a study that we compared all crop seasons. The more fruit we have in the first and second bloom, the higher the probability of these fruit to grow. Why is that so? Fruits were going to be on the tree for longer during the rain period. So we have more solar radiation. So we're going to have more carbohydrate to grow. Okay, that's favorable. Second one here, second variable is favorable. Third, when is rainfall important? It's really important post-flowering for fruit setting, for cell to divide in the fruit. But the critical area or time here is from late April to July, early August. The 3 months here are decisive. This year, we were fortunate to have rainfall generalized in the whole state in April. We had rainfall below average for January to March. So that provided us with relief. So this 40 to 80 millimeter rainfall helped a lot. However, rains that will now take place in May, June, July, especially in the rain-fed groves, are going to be decisive for fruit size. And the weather forecast tells that average rainfall will be below average, in fact, historical average. Now, if I have fruit, when I strip the tree in April, if it's 70, if it's 90, if it's 100 grams, situations are different. Now we have a second bloom prevailing, so fruit is relatively small, below average, 71 grams. And then we have an equation that has been studied for several years that will have a correlation above 90%. When we have those two factors here together, number of fruit, percentage of second and second bloom, 90% here. What is the rainfall forecast for May to July? And what is the fruit weight right now? Then I can project the figure, and the correlation is really high. And the number here is 158, not 157, not 159. Can this figure change? Well, if we have more rainfall, fruit will grow. If the rainfall is slower, fruit's going to be smaller. That is the decisive factor that will interfere. And the harvest type. If we have a delayed harvest, and we had rain, fruit will grow. If we advance harvest and it didn't rain, fruit's going to be smaller. Here, just for us to talk about the last factor that is really important. Historical fruit drop in the past 10, 12, 13%. Do you know what the fruit drop we had in Florida before? 15, 20, and then greening increased severity. That came up to 50, 60%. And today we have greening 44% in the last sampling. That's not going to change much. Well, but we are going to be sure of that in August. So it's around that with an upward trend. But the incidence, the intensity, and severity is increasing. Look at the fruit on the ground for an early variety here. And what do we expect this year? Severity that is higher for greening. The disease plant is going to be more diseased, drier year, and harvest, because it's second bloom mostly, we have a requirement in terms of quality, bricks, high ratio, and that's going to be later. With the fruit staying on the tree for longer during the dry season, especially for early and mid-season, we're going to have a trend for increased fruit drop. And that's why we are increasing the fruit drop percentage that was 17.8 to 20. Where does this 20 come from? Renato carried out a study that was really interesting and complex that said, what was the fruit drop due to greening? 17 to 20 in the past, 6-7 years ago. 3% was due to greening. And then 3-4 years later, 5%. Last year, 8%. This year, 9%. With the severity of greening increasing 2-3 points, this intensity changing then to 20, 21, 22, 25, the equation shows an increase of 2% because of the greening. So the 2 points that we're increasing here is due to greening and also due to a later harvest, delayed harvest. Also, we have here third and fourth bloom not being important, so we have less fruit fly and fruit borer. But this year, January, February was too dry and hot, so leprosis increased. And this whole game here, we came up with a 20% then of fruit drop. Not 18, 19, but 20. Can that change? Yes, if we delay harvest more, if we have a drier climate, then it's going to be higher fruit drop. If we have more rainfall, then this fruit drop will decrease. So today, this is the game we have. In the sector today, where we produce 314 million boxes, 11% of the fruit that will drop to the ground, 35 million boxes of that is due to greening. See the damage this disease is causing? What about the reduction of the production yield? Well, in the groves that we have 30% greening or more, a grove that could produce then 40, 60 ton, maybe it will produce now 40 because of greening. Another, well, it's not all bad news. Now I have good news. Quality of fruit's going to be better this crop season. Another good news. How we were in 2023. I couldn't even sleep at the time because I was so worried. Greening was off track completely. We had lost control of the silage with the diagnosis that we carried out at the time. But then we had a change in rotation, intensified control management with new molecules being brought in, higher mix volume. So the population of psyllid came down 30 to 40%. People say it's just climate. Climate is important. Renato's going to talk about that, of course. But 30% of the explanation is greening, and the growers' competence, citrus growers' competence. So I can assert to you that the incidence and young growth is starting to decrease. They're planting in the right area. They're having the right management. So we are starting to reverse the greening situation. Yeah, but this disease is going to decrease severity in the short term. No, that's going to increase. But I'm sure, totally sure, I'm positive that in 5 years we are going to have less greening than we do have today. CVC, 44%, today's half. But this disease here is the worst we have in the world. Wherever it went, it ruined it. It's not a regular, bug. If we do not use science, technology, and smartness and competence on the part of citrus growers, then we won't be able to control it. So the disease was here, started small and then it went up to 44.35%. I talked to specialists, experts, and I said, how's going to be the grain in 2025? They said 65%. But no, we are 44, and that is due to citrus growers' competence. You did the job. So this is a summary. I'm almost wrapping up here. Daniela promised, Daniela asked me to promise that I would be brief. So 182 million trees, bearing trees here, 30% more fruit, 2 points more of percent points of drop rate, and fruit per box a little bit lower. With that, we are going to have yield that is 1.7, 2 boxes per plant, and yield of 870 boxes per hectare. We are going back to better levels. If climate was phenomenal, the whole area maybe would have come up with 1,000 boxes. If the climate was poor, the whole area maybe 600. So, but here, we have a lot of work, a lot of science, choosing of areas, irrigation, fertilization. We improved cultural practices and growths, and that led us to better fruit setting and fruit development. And my last slide, in life, I have had privilege. They say that the best privilege is the wisdom that God gives us. I don't think I am a gifted person. I'm average. But there is a team here that I'm very proud of they are above average. Fundecitrus is the top reference worldwide of knowledge, both in the field and research. And in life, I've had major masters and thinkers. Let me mention 2 quotations. They're the two most important people I had in my life. Roberto Rodriguez, the former agriculture minister, he says, a country without science has no future. What I would like to say with that is that if we do not have research, knowledge, we won't have a future. We have beaten citrus tristeza virus, CVC, citrus canker, and we are now building a bridge in terms of greening because we have water, soil, and climate given by God. But God has not given us two things. One is science, the knowledge, and to be here doing this. And the second is resilience, persistence, determination of citrus growers. I do not know in the whole world a citrus grower there's more competent than those in the Sao Paulo and southwest Minas Gerais citrus belt. And to overcome greening, if we do not have people to have determination and resilience, we won't get anywhere. The second person here is the top scientist. And we named our research center after him, his visionary. He said, never give up. And he would say, the best citriculture in the world has to have a research center that is compatible with the magnitude it deserves. For 20 years, we had Beauvais until 5 years ago. We were working with the research center in Sao Paulo, and now we are going to start the most important research center with the FAPESP and Exalc, the agriculture college in Brazil. We're going to have 7 countries in the world, a lot of researchers with investments by the state, $3 million that will provide us with more than 50 PhDs involved, and we are going to come to 100 of them, and Fundecitrus will be part of that. But if we don't have this, we won't be able to overcome the problems we may face, be it greening, climatic change, lower availability of labor, or sustainability issues. But with this and the support of all industries and citrus growers, I'm positive that we're going to move forward. So I'm very happy today because we are beating the psyllid population and we are picking up to come to a crop that will keep our citriculture competitive. Thank you so much. Thank you, Juliano, for bringing us relevant information. And we have good news, right? Nothing better than have an expectation of a higher crop. I would like to remind you that the summary of a crop forecast survey will be published shortly on the Fundecitrus website, and the full report will be made available soon. On behalf of Fundecitrus, I thank everyone who joined us. Have a great crop season. We'll now stop our broadcast.